Really consider buying Bitcoin right now. You really should. In this video, I'm going to go over why you should consider buying Bitcoin and why you should especially consider buying Bitcoin right now. We're going to look at a whole bunch of charts. We're going to look at moving averages. We're going to look at different ways of calculating the risks, calculating the history of Bitcoin price appreciation, indicators of what causes Bitcoin to go up in the past, and where we are today. So without a further ado, before we can get to these charts, we have to explain what are cycles. Cycles in any market are simply the result of people becoming overly fearful and overly greedy. And so at certain times, you have people that are overly greedy. And at other times, you have people that are very scared. And so they sell too much or they buy too much. This is how you get volatility of price. Now, Bitcoin inherently is very volatile. Why is it? It is inherently volatile because the market, aka the globe, aka billions of human brains, are trying to figure out what is the value of this thing and what is the total addressable market in the future. And so because we're unsure what this technology is, because we're unsure of what the ultimate end value of this thing is, we have extremely optimistic and extremely pessimistic expectations that rise and fall very quickly. Now, I have looked at this thing, and many of you have looked at this thing too, and we have concluded that the total addressable market, we have concluded that the total monetary premium this thing is going to be given is going to be astronomical in the future. And so the reason we have this volatility today essentially just comes down to a misunderstanding the market of what this thing actually is. It is a misunderstanding of what the technology is, and it's a misunderstanding of the value of the technology for the world. And so really when we're looking at volatility, we're not trying to price in absolute value of the thing. We're simply trying to gauge what is the market communicating their perception of the value of Bitcoin is. And so I just want to clarify before getting these charts, that is unpredictable. These charts could entirely break at any time to the upside or to the downside. I think it is much more probable they break to the upside really quickly at some point in the next 5, 10 years, maybe longer or so. But at some point, people will begin to realize that all their models are destroyed, and they'll begin to realize that we should no longer be pricing this thing in terms of what other people's perception of it is, fearful or greedy. Instead, we should be pricing it in terms of where it's going in the long term. So without a further ado, let's get to some moving averages here. This was posted recently by one of my friends on Twitter, Kale. He posts great stuff, has a great Substack and everything of that sort. And so what we're looking here, we're looking at three different lines. This black line here is Bitcoin price since 2012, so over 10 years of price history here. This is logarithmic terms. So if you look on the right over here, it's important to keep in mind we're going from $4, $6, $13, $28, $62, $200, $900, $6,300, all the way up to $50,000 here. So again, this is logarithmic. So all the way back in 2012, we have a $2, $6, $9 Bitcoin. Then 2016 or so, we're looking at roughly $200. In 2019, we're looking at a few $1,000s, and now we're just under 30,000 US dollars at the time of recording. So that's the black line. The blue line here, we are looking at a moving average, the 200-week EMA, and the yellow line here, we're looking at the 200-week SMA. Now, these are two different moving averages, and these orange circles are the black line, times that the black line has gone below the blue line here. So moving averages, again, are just a way of projecting the average of human emotion for that time, and it's delayed. But again, based on human perception, which is not an accurate way of measuring reality, but based on human perception, Bitcoin very rarely has been below this line. So we see 1, 2, 3, we see 8 circles. We see 8 occurrences that Bitcoin has gone below this line. The first 3 back here were in 2015, throughout the entirety of 2015. And at that time, Bitcoin was roughly $200. This other one over here in the early 2019 here, Bitcoin was roughly $3,000. This one here in 2020, besides the wick of the coronavirus wick, we have roughly $4,000 or $3,500 right here. And now we've had 3 more circles at this $30,000 range. And so this is, in my opinion, very significant because this doesn't happen very often. There have only been 3 clusters of these orange circles before. Bitcoin at $200, Bitcoin at $3,000, and now Bitcoin at $30,000. And so if that continues, it's entirely possible to expect that we may not be at a period where the market is this oversold, is this pessimistic, it is trading Bitcoin this low based on the average market perception. until maybe Bitcoin's $300,000. That's something worthy to consider. Who knows when that would be, next year or 10 years from now, probably less than 10 years, but that's important to consider, that this doesn't happen very often. And it's happened not once, not twice, but thrice in the last few months here, that Bitcoin has been this oversold. And it makes sense. We have a record tightening of the US dollar. The US dollar is extremely tight right now. And so people are running to their perceived safety in their fear because they're scared of Bitcoin. They're running to that perceived safety of the US dollar. Now, I often get asked, at what point do I think that breaks to the upside? I think it breaks to the upside when the perceived fear of noting dollars rises past the perceived fear of noting Bitcoin. At the point at which Bitcoin is realized to be the lower risk asset versus US dollars, I think that's when all these models begin to break. But for now, when human emotion is still illogical, this is just one indicator to show that maybe Bitcoin might be oversold here. So if we're going to transition here from Caleb's chart to a different, a similar but different section here, again, we have Bitcoin price in black. We have a moving average in green and a moving average in red. And so when Bitcoin's price tends to go over this particular red moving average, that is a signal that perhaps the market is getting too hot, perhaps people are getting too greedy, and are going to begin to sell and take profits into the US dollar. And likewise, these rare periods where price dips below the green line, here the first time in 2011, Bitcoin was $2. Here the second time, it was roughly $250 to $300. Third time, again, we're looking at roughly $3,500. Briefly, just for about a couple weeks here in 2020, about $5,000. And now we've had an extremely long period of time here since the end, or since mid-2022, all the way over a year now, Bitcoin has been below that moving average. To me, this is extremely compelling. We can see the very first half of an S curve here, perfect higher highs and higher lows. And that's just something to keep in mind. Last time Bitcoin was below the screen moving average this long, it was it was just about $1,000 or so. Or excuse me, I think oh yeah, no, a couple $100. I was up by order of magnitude here. So anyway, last time Bitcoin was below this moving average this much, it was 100x cheaper. It's not, it's unbelievable. I can't even realize I'm saying that, but that's the truth. Bitcoin has not been below this moving average since it was 1% of today's value. Let's look at a different one here. This is the MVRV score. It takes market cap minus realized cap and divides it by the standard deviation of the market cap in USD. But math aside, this is the visual here. Again, we have a red band for when Bitcoin's typically been overbought and a green band for when Bitcoin's typically been oversold. Again, what does this Z-score seen here in orange tell us? Well, it tells us here in 2011, the Z-score was below the green band, so extremely oversold. And Bitcoin was just a couple bucks here. A few years later, same thing happens. A few years later, same thing happens again. And here we are. Today, Bitcoin is just above this green band, and price is $30,000. So to me, that's pretty interesting. Our HODL ratio, again, similar thing. We can see this indicator in orange here. We have one at the end of this fear cycle here in 2012 when Bitcoin was $7. Here again, when Bitcoin was roughly $220. Roughly again, when it was $3,500. And now when we're looking at the teens, $16,000, $15,000, $18,000 per Bitcoin, it was in the green zone here. So it's no longer in the green zone. It seems to be rising out of the green zone. And this period here seems to be the most similar period that we're in, something like 2019 here, when Bitcoin was $9,000 to $10,000. Now it's triple that, but just because Bitcoin price is triple that doesn't mean that humans are 3 times as rational. They're still selling it off because we are not rational. Yeah, so another way to look at it is net unrealized profit and loss. This is a great site, by the way. This website is called Look Into Bitcoin. You can really look into Bitcoin here. Again, black line, same thing, Bitcoin price on a logarithmic scale. Blue line, we have Bitcoin here in net unrealized profit or loss. We can see, again, panic cycle, greed cycle, panic cycle, greed cycle, panic cycle, greed cycle. And now here we are. This greed cycle was not as dramatic as previous ones. I think a major part of that was FTX and other institutions offering paper Bitcoin. And I think, in fact, we will continue to see more paper Bitcoin offered, which will suppress Bitcoin price. However, that's not sustainable, and that's not our long-term strategy. Notice how FTX is no longer with us. So yes, these institutions will offer paper Bitcoin. They will suppress price. However, it's an extremely short-term and extremely difficult scheme to keep alive for a long period of time, as FTX has showed us. And so this is where we are today. Bitcoin has recovered off this local fear cycle. And now in the last week or so here, we see this crash in Bitcoin price. And many people are scared, like, oh, look, Bitcoin fell 10% here. Well, this is in black here. That's all we're looking at, that little line down. That's the only crash we're looking at. See, in terms of sentiment fell a lot faster than price did up here. So anyway, something to keep in mind, that this blue line tends to go up along with price. Reserve risk, we can look at a similar thing. This red line showing us reserve risk for Bitcoin. It was in this green zone for about a year and a half at roughly $200 to $600. And then it was here again for roughly 3-4 months in 2019 when it was from $3,000 to $6,000 or so. And now we've been in this green zone again since Bitcoin fell here at the Terra Luna collapse in early June of 2022 at $30,000, all the way here to over a year later, Bitcoin is still $30,000, and it's still in this green zone. So even though Bitcoin has doubled off of its low from 15,000 to 30,000 US dollars, and many of these metrics, sentiment is no higher than it was then. I've been online, vocal and public in the Bitcoin space during this whole rally, this doubling of Bitcoin from $15,000 to $30,000, and I can tell you, sentiment within Bitcoin and even outside Bitcoin is not significantly better than it was then. And so I'm very interested what's going to happen in the future when sentiment does really begin to pick up. How many more doublings is Bitcoin going to have in terms of USD before some people take profits back into the perceived value US dollar, while people still falsely assume the US dollar is a safe store of value. Here's a different one. This is a little simpler. This is realized price. So realized price for Bitcoin, we have black line, Bitcoin price. Notice how the realized price of Bitcoins being exchanged continues to go up with time as Bitcoin's price goes up. And what we see here, very few times does Bitcoin price fall below realized price. Again, $3, 2011, $200, 2014, 2015, $3,000, 2019, very briefly at the virus crash. And now again, we saw it in late 2022. Now we're roughly $9,000 higher, or roughly 50% higher of realized price. Let's zoom in here so we can get a better look of what we're looking at. But see, again, these times were excellent times to buy. Late 2022, early 2023, I was begging people to buy there. Right here, beginning of 2023, this is when I began posting on Twitter, and Bitcoin shot up right above that. I don't claim any responsibility for that bullish action in Bitcoin price as a result of my tweets, but it's a funny coincidence that Bitcoin pumps up after these lows at the beginning of my little Twitter career here. And so, yeah, this is what we have here. Some people are very pessimistic on Bitcoin falling. I think it could easily fall to $20,000 again. That's not a prediction. Do not bet on it. But I think it easily could. You know, we were below it just a few months ago, and I think we could fall below it again. But I'm not going to wait around for it to fall to $20,000, and you probably should not either, because there's no guarantee. It could just keep going up. Like I said just a moment ago, Bitcoin doubled from 15,000 to 30,000, and sentiment barely changed. So yeah, it could easily keep going up. It could go to $40,000 or $50,000 easily, without needing some sort of big parabolic bull market, without needing some sort of massive ETF approval, without needing some new corporation or nation state or whomever adopting Bitcoin and putting themselves on a Bitcoin standard. You don't need all that for Bitcoin to keep going up. Likewise, Bitcoin could go down and you don't need some sort of terrible world-ending event. But really, at the end of the day, you realize you should not try to predict the market. Again, it's not rational. It's simply cycles of fear and greed. And if you're going to try to predict Bitcoin price, you're just predicting human emotion. And please do not try to predict human emotion. Half the time you'll be wrong, and that half the time will be significantly more expensive than the times you are right. Here we look at value days destroyed. Long story short, these red sections are times where it is probably being overbought. Again, greed cycles. And green down here are times where it is probably being oversold. Right now, we're in orange, which much of the time it is in orange. So very healthy. And again, remember, all these models will be broken as Bitcoin eventually begins to reach escape velocity to the upside, as people begin to view the dollar as the greedy trade instead of the fearful trade as it is perceived now. So I think we have one more. Oh, yes. So this is not a chart. This is the movie I'm working on. This is another reason to be bullish, I would hope. I'm working on a movie. It's called The Case for Bitcoin, and it is a low time preference feature length Bitcoin movie. That's a presentation by myself, hopefully with a quality applicable and engaging to a wide audience. I hope that this film, among many other films that are coming up, many other Bitcoin projects coming out, Bitcoin companies, Bitcoin solutions coming out, that will incentivize Bitcoin education and Bitcoin adoption. See, first we have Bitcoin being adopted as a store of value, second, later on, as a medium of exchange, and then third, as a unit of account. But the store of value adoption really needs education, and it really needs solutions, client solutions. And so I am hopeful that this film I'm working on will be one of those main solutions to help people understand Bitcoin. You can watch a trailer here on this Geyser page. Geyser is a great place. It's basically the Kickstarter for Bitcoiners that is censorship resistant. You can read more about the film here. One of the things I'm really hoping is that this film will reach 1 million people. And if we just assume 2% of them become Bitcoiners as a result of this film, the hope is that every dollar spent or donated on this project will go to orange pilling one person. So we have lots of incredible supporters here. This project has done very well in Geyser in terms of the number of sats raised. We raised over 33 million sats on Geyser alone, as well as the number of people supporting. It's really optimistic. So what's the takeaway from this video? Well, you should remember, you should keep in mind that all these models are simply ways of trying to project human emotion onto Bitcoin. And one of the main theses for Bitcoin is that it's going to eventually break upwards as this nonsensical period of human emotion putting down Bitcoin eventually collapses and everyone realizes the only logical conclusion that Bitcoin's a monetary singularity. But in the meantime, even within this world of insanity that we're in now, even within that world, even within that frame of reference, people are being extremely too pessimistic on Bitcoin. Even if you're just in it for trading, which I do not recommend, Bitcoin is still a slam dunk of a buy in the long term. I don't know what it's doing next week. I don't know what's doing next month. But assuming Bitcoin survives and assuming Bitcoin continues to have immutable scarcity outside the control of any single human being, probably 30,000 US dollars per Bitcoin is going to be looked back upon in the same way we were looking at many of these other charts at $200. Would you like to buy Bitcoin at $200? Would you like to buy Bitcoin at $3,000? You can do it today, Bitcoin for $30,000. And if you enjoyed this presentation, please consider donating to my film. Maybe take some money, buy some Bitcoin, take some money, donate to my film. Hopefully the film will accelerate Bitcoin adoption and make your own Bitcoin stack more valuable. Thank you for your time. And please consider donating, link in the description. Thanks.